So the new book's called I Live in the Future and Here's How It Works. And it really started because I was curious about how our brains are changing on the web. I grew up with computers. I had my first computer and video game system when I was 4 years old, and so I've kind of lived a little bit further into the future than most people, and I'm kind of analogous to the kids that are growing up today and now entering the workforce. And I really wanted to understand how technology is affecting the way we tell stories, the way we consume information, the way we share information. And so I really looked at that. And so the book actually looks at from multiple different angles about the future of technology. And first of all, it looks at the neuroscience of our brains changing and how they're changing, and actually a positive look at that. It looks at a lot of the economics of how business is adapting to games. The book looks at how business is changing. One of the things that I really look at is the gaming industry. First of all, video games, which are extremely good for our brain. A lot of neuroscience shows that. Companies like Foursquare and Twitter and Facebook are really looking at this idea of virtual goods, and people are really excited about collecting those. And it's very different from what we've had in the past, where people had tangible objects. And so it really looks at that. Another area of the book talks about the social networks and how they're not just about saying, I want to eat a hamburger or I just went to lunch here. They're really about how we share information in this tremendous amount of information flow and overload that we're experiencing online. The talks are extremely visual. I run through a lot of slides very quickly to really kind of keep people engaged in a way that it's not just a PowerPoint document sitting on the stage. It's actually, there's video and there's really beautiful visualizations and so on. And the Q&A, I really try to get people engaged. I mean, I really try to make it a conversation. One of the things I've done at the New York Times is I've really tried to engage with the readers, and I do the same thing when I give talks. I really try to make things a much broader conversation and ask questions and answer questions and so on. So I'm the lead technology writer for the New York Times Bits blog, and I also write for the paper. And my mandate is really to just cover anything in technology and business related to technology. So I write a lot about Apple and Microsoft and companies like that, but I really look at trends too, to see what's happening with social media, with technology and devices. I've written a lot about the future of hardware and flexible displays that we'll see in the future, about cars that drive themselves, about robots that will be in our home in the next 10 years. Really looking at the future of technology and where it's going. And I've also tried to take a really analytic look at what's happening with the publishing industry and media in general and how it's being affected by the technology that's changing it. I think one of the technologies in meetings that people should be exploring is really making it more engaging. Right now you sit in a meeting, there's 20 people sitting around a conference table, and half the time people are checking their phone and computer and things like that. And I think it's the same thing that's happening with kids when they're watching TV, right? They're watching the television, but it's just not engaging enough, and so they're sending text messages and things like that. And being able to take a meeting culture and change it in a way that people are actually engaged, and that there's much more interaction in the same way that we have in the real world online, I think is really gonna change the way we actually have meetings.
Talk a little about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the problems with meetings is that there's a few things. One is that they're a set time slot, right? They fit into an hour, right? And then not necessarily, it's not necessary for them to be that way, right? That's one problem. And I think technology, if you can figure out ways to interact technology within there, you can say, hey, this meeting only needs to be 4 minutes long or 37 minutes long or whatever it is. So one of the things that we're seeing happening is that our brains are adapting across the board, right? So if I watch television and interact on my computer at the same time and look things up in the movie that I'm watching, when I go to a meeting, I'm going to be expecting the same kind of interaction. And some of the conferences I speak at, I try to have a Twitter stream flowing through behind me off to the side showing what people are saying. I try to show interactive videos and things like that. And even in some settings, I actually try to engage the audience and ask them questions where they can vote on their mobile phone on an answer, and then we actually show it at the end of the meeting. And I think that that's really important to try to get people engaged in a way so they're not just sitting there and consuming, but they're also engaging in a different way than they have in the past. I think one of the things that people don't realize is that the future in technology and the way it's changing is actually affecting every single industry that we involve ourselves with. It's the medical industry, it's real estate, it's media, it's even the way we spend our family time and dinner and things together. And I think that one of the things I really looked at in the book is really trying to figure out how that's going to change over the next 2 to 5 years. I think one of the things that meeting planners ought to be doing is actually thinking about how to make a conference more engaging. And this is something that people have been struggling with for the past few years, but technology has finally caught up. You know, everyone in the room has a BlackBerry or an iPhone or a laptop, and it really can make it a much more engaging experience, right? People can be a part of a much broader conversation, whereas in the past it's probably been more of a one-way street, and the same thing's happened with media. And now it can actually be this conversation where people are engaging in different ways, and there's back channels happening where conversations are taking place between the speaker and the audience, or between different audience members. And I also think that there's ways to say, you know, if a speaker's talking about an event or something, there can be more information that's available online for audience members to view. I think we're seeing that a lot of meetings are actually moving beyond the actual life of the meeting. I actually did a talk last year where I created some videos that were sent out to people that were going to be attending the conference beforehand, and then there was actual links that we sent out afterwards, and we engaged on Twitter and other social networks, and we can actually see that people are not just engaged at that moment in time for the hour-long period or however long it is that the meeting takes place, but before, during, and after. I'm regularly in front of audience talking about the future of media and technology, but I'm also talking about how all of these things are changing society and how they're changing the way we live our lives. If you look at mobile phones, for example, they've only been around really for a few years in the way that they are today, and it really caught everyone by storm. And I really try to look at those trends and try to let people know about what's coming next, what's going to be in the next 2, 5, 10 years. Another thing I look at in the book is that people are understandably afraid of technology in society. But really there's nothing to really be afraid about. We've been here before. You know, people were afraid of the trains when they first came out. They were afraid of telephones, computers, comic books. All of these things have all brought fear into society, but in the end they've actually made it a better place to live in. There's been a lot of speculation over the past decade that computers and video games and all of these things are actually bad for our brain. But really the research shows that they're not. It's all about how we use these products, how we talk to customers, how we talk to consumers, and how we engage with people using technology in a different way.